Hello, comparative religions, and welcome to the second of two lessons on Judaism. Now, before we get started on the information in this lesson, I just want to be honest with you guys. I was listening to the first lesson, and I want to apologize. We have got so much to cover. I am really flying through this, and I know it was kind of a lot to handle with the last lesson. It was very, very disjointed. But there's a couple things going on. Number one, I'm trying to keep the lectures at a minimum in terms of time. And of course, the last one was pushing 25 minutes. So I want to keep it around that time. And then secondly, we are running out of time for this semester as well. So we have a lot that I still want to cover. So I just want to apologize because it seems like I'm flying through stuff. I'm also not getting into the level of detail that I normally would like to. So I just want to apologize for that up front. So here we go with the second lesson concerning Judaism. Now, in our first lesson, we talked about the origins of Judaism. We talked about the central figure of Abraham. Abraham is kind of the founder. He makes a covenant with God, which is an agreement with God. It's a very binding agreement for both sides. God promises to make Abraham the father of a great nation, and he promises to give him this promised land of Canaan. And there's this history throughout Judaism of trying to get to Canaan, and they're sent into exile and they're kicked out by different civilizations, and they make it back, and there's sin involved and everything like that. But the struggle is to get to Canaan because God has promised them that. And we talked about Moses and the Ten Commandments. We talked about five of the key groups in Judaism that are influencing not only the history of Judaism, but even up to through today: the Sadducees, the Pharisees, the um, Herodians, the Zealots, and the Essenes. Okay, so we gave a little bit about the background of Judaism. We're going to pick up and we're going to kind of transition to Judaism in modern times today. As we go through this lesson, again, I will try to tell you exactly what I want you to copy down. I would highly suggest you have that quiz review out. That might be a good source for you to use. If you can fill in the answer to those questions as we go through, that would probably be good because that's going to hit the high points of this lesson. Okay, so I'll tell you what I want you to copy down, but you also might want to have that worksheet handy. So we're going to start here with the Jewish diaspora. Okay, diaspora is Greek for scattering. This is when the Jews are relocated to cities during the Roman period and then later during the Middle Ages. Some go into hiding because they fear persecution. And the reason this is difficult, this scattering is difficult. And by the way, that's what I want you to get down. I want you to know that diaspora means scattering. And the Jews are scattered around the world, which is difficult to them because it takes them away from the promised land. Now, if there is a positive aspect of this, it is the fact that Jewish culture spreads. Okay. And notice I put a question mark there because if you're a Jew yourself, it's not positive because, like I said, it's taken them away from the promised land. But at the same time, you are spreading your culture and you are spreading your religion. Okay. Um, and that could be of comfort to you. Okay. So some people are going to see it as positive, some people are going to see it as negative. Diaspora means scattering. Now, as we move into the modern time, we're going to talk about the Jews under Christian and Muslim rule. Okay. I want you to get on this slide right here about the Spanish Jews. The Jews get scattered, they move into Spain. The Muslims conquer Spain in the 8th century CE, around the 8th century CE, and they bring a lot of new opportunities. Now, what's interesting is that the Muslims are very tolerant of other faiths, and they are very tolerant of the Spanish Jews. Now, why? The reason I say that is interesting is if you pay attention to current events, you know that Jews and Muslims often do not get along. But the Muslims that conquered Spain were very tolerant of other faiths, including Spanish Jews. In fact, the Spanish Jews become the leaders of worldwide Judaism, and because of their work with Muslims, they become leaders in terms of government, medicine, science, etc. Okay, and they're going to contribute greatly to those fields. What's interesting is that when the Christians come in, and keep in mind, Christianity, uh, and Islam does too, but Christianity traces its heritage back to Judaism. And Christianity stresses love thy neighbor as thyself and things like that. In fact, Christ, when he comes, he teaches those 10 commandments. He says, we're going to sum those up into two big commandments: love the Lord thy God with all thy heart and soul and mind, and then love thy neighbor as thyself. So Christians are taught that. But when the Christians show up, there's a new wave of persecution that is reestablished in the 14th century, which is going to lead us to the next slide. And I want you to get the next slide down. From Spain, Judaism is going to flood other European nations. Christianity is also flooding those nations. And the Christians are going to tend to expel and persecute the Jews in those nations. Okay? The Jews are going to end up fleeing to Eastern Europe and the Muslim states of the Ottoman Empire, because it's the Muslims that have been treating them with tolerance. So the Christians show up, and the Christians are going to be very intolerant. They're going to persecute them, and they're going to expel them. If you're in my history class, I've told you, when we're talking about the Holocaust with World War II, just about every country in Western Europe has kicked the Jews out at some point in time. England did it. Spain will eventually do it. France will do it. Portugal will do it. And of course, we know Germany will do it too. Okay, later on. But the Jews are going to flee to Eastern Europe and the Muslim states in the Ottoman Empire, because that's where they're feeling tolerance. We also see the Hebrew language begin to mix with other languages, including German, and we get a new form called Yiddish. And from that Yiddish language, we get some terminology that's still in use today. Okay, like bupkis, or nada, which means no, we're not going to do that. Chutzpah, which is nerve. Okay, if you got a lot of chutzpah, you got a lot of nerve. And cockamamie, which means not credible. Okay, if somebody's telling you a story that's ridiculous, you say that's a bunch of cockamamie. Okay, or that's a cockamamie story. Doesn't exist. It's not credible. Okay, but those are examples of Yiddish, this blending of Hebrew with other languages. Now, it is under the Christians, and you don't have to copy anything down on this slide. 1555, a papal decree forces the Jews into special quarters within cities called ghettos. There are restrictions, such as daily curfews, that make life very, very difficult. Okay, you get up, you go to work, you have to come back. We're going to see something very similar when we get into the Holocaust in the 20th century, okay, under Hitler. But you have these restrictions that make life very difficult in the ghettos. Then in 1648, we get the Jewish pogrom. Okay, the Ukrainian peasants, the Cossacks, rose up against the Polish nobility. So this is in Poland. In the process, many Jews are slaughtered. And the reason they are slaughtered is because they are blamed for siding with the Poles. So this is an early example of basically genocide. Okay, the Jews are going to get slaughtered because they are believed to have sided with the Poles, and we're going to see other episodes of violence throughout this period of time, all the way up through the 20th century. There's going to be a lot of pogroms that occur up through the 20th century. Okay, now most of them are going to be prominent in Eastern Europe. Okay, which is interesting because, like I said, the Jews have fled there because of persecution from other countries, and then that persecution is going to move to Eastern Europe as well. So these pogroms are going to appear, this violence toward these Jewish people, they're going to appear in Western Europe and Eastern Europe prior to World War II. In the late 17th and 18th centuries, we begin to see a change. Jews are given more freedom. And what they fear is a return to persecution. They've seen this before, okay? It goes all the way back to Egypt in the Bible, okay? The Hebrews end up in Egypt, okay, under Joseph. They are accepted in Egyptian society, but over time, the pharaohs come and go, and we get a new pharaoh in there, and the new pharaoh doesn't like the Hebrews, and he starts to persecute them. So there are a bunch of Jews that feel, okay, we've begun to get we've begun to get a little bit more freedom. Instead of things getting better, we have a feeling that things are going to get worse because one day people are going to start taking away that freedom and persecution will return. What we need is a formal homeland where we will be the dominant group and we can call the shots. That's going to lead to the development of Zionism. And I want you to get down this term Zionism. Zionism is a movement dedicated to the formation of a national homeland for the Jews. And that national homeland is going to be in the ancient territory, Palestine or Canaan, that was promised to them through the covenant between God and Abraham. Okay? So we've come full circle back to that original covenant. But Zionism is this movement dedicated to the formation of a Jewish homeland. They would like it back in the territory promised to them by God through Abraham. And we're going to see this Zionist movement. It waxes and wanes over time. And after World War II, it's going to come back in a vengeance. And of course, we know that that will lead to the establishment of the country of Israel in the 1950s. Okay, but Zionism is the establishment of a Jewish homeland. Of course, we can't talk about Judaism without mentioning the Holocaust, 1941 to 1945. That was the Nazis in Germany, their efforts to exterminate the Jews, and really anybody that doesn't conform to Hitler's master race or his Aryan race. After World War II, after the Holocaust, like I said, we're going to see those Zionist efforts revitalized, and it's going to confirm what the Zionists have been wanting all along, which is the creation of a Jewish homeland, and that will lead to the creation of the state of Israel. Okay, and with the creation of the state of Israel, now we're going to move into the more modern history of Judaism. Okay, we're going to transform things a little bit, and we'll move into the modern history of Judaism. There are still Jewish groups today. Now, they're not the Pharisees and the Sadducees and the Herodians and the Zealots and the Essenes. Today, we've got groups like the Karaites and the Kabbalists, okay? Now, the Karaites, and you don't have to worry about copying these down. The Karaites, that means readers of the Scripture. And the Karaites say that Old Testament is the only source of religious authority. And we're going to talk about the Talmud in a minute. They consider the Talmud an invention of rabbis, and since it is an invention of rabbis, it is not the same as the Old Testament or the Torah. That's where you go for your religious authority. Then you have the Kabbalists. Kabbalist means receive. Okay. This is a very mystic branch of Judaism, and it was very popular a few years ago. There were a lot of celebrities that became Kabbalists. Madonna, and that's her picture right there. Madonna became a Kabbalist. Okay. It focuses on areas of thought not normally associated with Judaism. Okay. The phenomena aspect of faith. All right. The Karaites will say faith, along with the Old Testament, faith is probably the most important thing. The Kabbalists, being mystics, will look for supernatural explanations for things, the phenomena, okay, if you will. Now, I do want you to get on the next group. The next group is the Hasidics. A Hasidic is someone who is pious. A Hasidic combines contentment with meekness and modesty. That combination of being content and meek and modest is going to transform the face of Eastern European Jewry. Okay? Think back to the Zealots and other groups that were not afraid to use violence. The Hasidics, in some respects, very much adopt passive resistance. And we're going to talk about this in a second. Some Jews believe it is their lot in life to suffer. So the Hasidics are content with that. In fact, they will find contentment because suffering means they are part of God's chosen people. And along with that comes extreme modesty and extreme meekness. This is the most widely practiced form of Judaism today, this combination of contentment and meekness and modesty. Another large group is the Orthodox group, and I want you to get down the Orthodox group. The Orthodox group is very, very conservative. They remain true to biblical and Talmudic regulations, so they will have equal reading of the Talmud and the Torah. And we'll talk about that in just a second. They also believe in a strict observance of the Sabbath on Saturday. Okay, and by strict observance, Saturday is supposed to be a day of rest, so you do not do any work. Cooking has to be done before that. Actually, I take that back. Sabbath is sundown on Friday to sundown on Saturday, I think. But all the work has to be done before the Sabbath, because the Sabbath is a day of rest. It's a time to reflect on God and God's blessings. Okay. In response to that, you have the Reform group, which is much less rigorous. Their changes reflect the modern age, and some restrictions have been modified. Like, they're not going to be strict observers of the Sabbath. They're still going to consider the Sabbath a holy day. You still have to observe it, but it's okay to cook a meal on the Sabbath. It's okay to do yard work or housework. It would be okay to do things like go to a movie or something like that. Okay, you can still honor God and do those things as well, according to the Reform group. Okay, so they reflect a more modern age, and their restrictions have been modified. Now, even though the Orthodox are conservative, there is another group called the conservative group. And the conservative group takes a little from the Orthodox group and a little from the Reform group and mixes it together. Okay? They will retain Saturday morning services and the covering of men's heads. Okay, so they will keep some of the Orthodox views, but they will also take some of the more modern views. For example, service will be held in the vernacular. It won't just be held in Hebrew. They will still have Hebrew parts, but they will also use other languages as well to carry out their services. Okay. Then you have another group, the Reconstructionists. That's a more recent American movement. It is very, very secular in nature. In fact, they push Judaism away from a religion to more of a tradition. Okay, it is good to observe these practices. It's good to observe these customs because that's what we traditionally have done. There is no religious significance to them whatsoever. Okay, so it's very secular in nature. Now, with all this discussion of Judaism, we've got to talk about God, and I want you to get down this slide. According to Jews, God is omnipotent, which means He's almighty. He has unlimited power. In fact, we talked about the questions with omnipotence. Okay, you know, if God is omnipotent, why does He give us free will? Okay, we've talked about that. He's also omniscient. All right? He's all-knowing and infinitely wise. He's the creator. Everything is in existence by His will. He gave us the 10 Commandments. They are instructions for living. He balances mercy and justice. Okay. And He is God, which means He is apart from nature and form. It is difficult to describe Him and what He looks like because He is so powerful. Now, there's no rejection from the material world. You should focus on God, but the material world could be embraced because those are gifts from God. Okay? Along with this comes this idea that we are created in God's image. And as such, we are ordained to demonstrate God's justice and mercy. And since there is only one God, and we are dealing with the origins of the other main monotheistic religions, Judaism and Christianity, you will see these characteristics also attributed to God in the other monotheistic religions as well. Okay, because there is one God, and they would also argue all of these things that we've talked about. Okay, these omnipotent, omniscient, all that stuff. Now, what separates them from Judaism is the Jews believe they are God's chosen people. All right. Everybody has the option of choosing to follow the Ten Commandments. The Jews choose to do so. As such, they are the chosen people, okay? Because the Jews agreed to follow the Ten Commandments, they are the chosen people. Also, and we've talked about this a little bit in this presentation and the other presentation, there is this heavy belief that the Jews are chosen to suffer. Okay, I want you to get down both of these things. What does it mean to be a chosen people? Number one, they choose to follow the Ten Commandments, and number two, they believe they have been chosen to suffer. In fact, the fact that they suffer shows they are the chosen people. Okay, because they have chosen God and they're going to suffer for God. So that means they are the chosen people. Eventually, though, things are going to get better for the Jews in the person of the Messiah. And I want you to get down this slide. There has been the promise of a Messiah since ancient times. In fact, if you go back and you read the Torah, there's the promise of Messiah in the Torah. It will be somebody with strong leadership and wisdom sent to redeem mankind, and it will be of the line of David. Now, there's some debate among Jews about what that means. Will it be, um, physically from the line of David, from David's family, or will he just represent characteristics of David, the strong leadership, the wisdom, etc., etc.? And that's up for much debate. There is also today a more modern view that the whole of Jewish people, they are the Messiah themselves. It is a collective movement sent to redeem humanity. So there are some Jews that are not looking for an individual person so much as they say, we, the Jews, are the Messiah. We will point people to God because we followed the Ten Commandments and through our suffering and stuff like that. We're going to save mankind because of that. Okay, so some Jews see themselves as the Messiah. Faith. Now you don't have to copy this down. Faith is grounded in the current world. It is very, very orthodox in nature. They do believe in sin, but the question is, how does one deal with a transgression? For Jews, the Messiah will help answer that. Okay, the Messiah is going to be sent to redeem mankind, and the Messiah will help answer this question. Okay, they do look forward. There are concepts. I know it says that faith is grounded in the current world. There is a concept of heaven and hell, okay, and an afterlife, and God will send you to either place. The Messiah is going to be key into understanding how that afterlife comes out to play. Okay, what happens to you, what is required for you to go to heaven versus what's going to send you to hell. Okay, the Messiah will help answer those questions. In terms of Jewish sacred writing, okay, you have the Jewish Bible. All right, it's not the same as the Christian Bible; it's the Jewish Bible. It is Greek for books. Okay, it is Greek for books. Now, there have been copies of the Jewish Bible made, the earliest known copies. In fact, these copies have helped validate the more recent copies, were the Dead Sea Scrolls, which date to around the 2nd century BCE. And the discovery of those Dead Sea Scrolls, the Essenes are part of that. That helps validate a lot of the information that's in the Torah and the Old Testament. The Jewish Torah, the Jewish Bible, is the Old Testament in the Christian Bible. Now, the Jewish Bible contains 24 books in 3 sections: the Torah, the Nebiim, and the Ketubim. Okay? Now, I want you to get these 3 sections down. Okay? The Torah, the first 5 books, Genesis, Exodus, Leviticus, Numbers, and Deuteronomy. We assume that the author is Moses. Okay, in fact, like I said in the last lesson, he writes the books and he puts the books in the Ark of the Covenant along with the Ten Commandments. And that's what the Torah does. It explains that history and explains that law and then gives instructions for the Jewish people. Then you have the Nebiim, which is the book of the prophets. And in that you find stories that answer the question about how one lives. So what we're doing is we're taking the law and the instructions given in the Torah, and in the Nebium we have stories of like David and Solomon and Saul and other prophets illustrating how the law is carried out, especially on a daily basis. Then you have the Kethabim. They are very artistic in nature, so books like Psalm, Song of Solomon, okay, Lamentations. They're the books of poetry, like I said, very artistic in nature, and they tend to focus on the human condition, okay. Psalms is a good example because in Psalms you're going to have Psalms that talk about how great humanity is and how wonderful things are going, and then you're going to have Psalms that talk about woe is me, I turn everywhere, I cannot find any rest, I'm being pursued by my enemies, everything is crawling around me or crumbling around me, but there's hope, and that hope is God. Okay? So they focus on the human condition, they'll talk about the good stuff, and they'll talk about the bad stuff. Outside of this Jewish Bible in those three sections, you're going to have the Talmud, and I want you to get down this. The Talmud is commentary, tradition, and precedents that supplement the Jewish Bible. It was created by Jewish rabbis. It's rabbinical in nature. What's interesting is I don't think the Talmud has ever been. Nobody has ever said it's inspired the same way the Torah is. Okay, they say it's commentary on the Torah. But a lot of people put it up there with the Torah in terms of importance within the Jewish religion, which is why the Karaites don't like it. Okay, the Karaites are like, look, the only divine scripture is the Old Testament, the Jewish Bible. That's where we need to turn. These things are created by rabbis, and they're not on the same level. Okay, even if some people think that they are. And to be honest with you, like I said, I don't think any of the rabbis said this is the same type of holiness as the Torah. But some treat it that way, and that's why the Karaites are against it. Okay, but all the Talmud are the commentaries, traditions, and precedents that it's like the annotation, the footnotes, if you will, for the Jewish Bible. Now, you can stop copying for a while, put your pencil down, and stuff like that. I just want to give you some more information. I'll tell you when to pick stuff up again here in a few minutes. Other sacred writings include the Midrash, which is a collection of literary works and interpretations of legal and non-legal matters. It is also rabbinical. Okay, it was created by rabbis. Both the Talmud and the Midrash are thought to be a level just below the Torah, which was considered to have been revealed by God. So the Torah is revealed by God. The Talmud and the Midrash are right below it, which is why the Karaites are so concerned about it. And the Karaites are like, no, we just need to focus on the Torah. Okay. Within these sacred writings come details, and I take that back. Within the Midrash and the Talmud come details about Jewish observances and high holy days. Okay, now some of the high holy days are mentioned in the Torah, but then they're described in more detail about what you should and should not do during the high holy days in the Talmud and the Midrash. Okay, now in terms of Jewish observances, there are rites of passage. It's the bar mitzvah for boys and the bat mitzvah for girls. And it occurs at age 13. I do want you to get down that. I'm sorry. I do want you to get down age 13. Age 13 is the recognition of adulthood by members of the community. That's when you enter the Jewish community. There are rites of passage in terms of marriage. Okay. Sometimes they can be arranged, sometimes they're not. For certain groups, the stigma of divorce is less than in other countries. So, for some Jews, divorce is a very, very serious thing. For others, it's not. Okay. There are ceremonies associated with death. Burial must be within 24 hours. And then afterwards, you have a Shiva, which is a 7-day period of mourning. Okay. So buried within 24 hours. And then you have a 7-day period of mourning following it. Weekly, you observe the Sabbath. It's from dusk Friday, like I said, sundown on Friday to sundown on Saturday. It is a day of rest and atonement. How you rest determines, we talked about some of those groups. Some people are going to be very, very strict about that rest. Some people are going to be a little bit more flexible. Traditionally, you have a Sabbath meal. The woman of the house lights candles as the man recites special benediction over wine and bread. There's a little ceremony and there's a little meal to commemorate the Sabbath every week. Daily, you pray. Okay, you pray the Shema. The Shema is usually recited twice a day, and this is the Shema right here. Hear, O Israel, the Lord our God, the Lord is one. And thou shalt love the Lord thy God with all thine heart, with all thy soul, and with all thy might. And these words which I command thee this day shall be in thine heart, and you shall teach them diligently unto thy children, and shall walk of them when thou sittest, and shall talk of them when thou sittest in thine house, and when thou walkest in thy way, and when thou liest down, and when thou risest up. You shall bind them for a sign upon thy hand, and they shall be as frontlets between thy eyes, and thou shalt write upon them, and thou shalt write them upon the posts of thy house and on thy gates. Okay, that's the prayer. All right. Some groups, the more orthodox groups, are going to take this literally, and you will have these little refractories, these little wooden boxes that people strap to the palms of their hand and strap to their foreheads, because it says, okay, you shall bind them as a sign upon thy hand and as a frontlet between thine eyes. So there are these little boxes that people put on their hands and on their forehead because of this prayer. Also, on Jewish households, when you come in the doorway, you will often find a mezuzah. A mezuzah has a prayer in it because at the last verse here it says, "You shall write them upon the posts of thy house and on thy gates." So when you come into a Jewish person's home, you might find a mezuzah, which is a little box containing this prayer. Okay, hear, O Israel, the Lord thy God, the Lord is one. Thou shalt love the Lord thy God with all thine heart, all thy soul, and all thy might. Okay. Now, there are special days within Jewish observances, and I believe, um, according to the Torah, there are 7 throughout the year. Okay, now I do want you to get down these right now. Okay, the high holy days are Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur. Rosh Hashanah is the Jewish New Year. It occurs in the autumn, some point in time. It's a 10-day period of penance. All right, it's when you acknowledge your sin and you pray for forgiveness and you pray for the Messiah. Judaism has a different calendar. Okay, they mark time differently than us. So, for example, in the year 2012, for us it was 2012. According to the Jewish calendar, it was the year 5773. And that year, Rosh Hashanah fell September 16th and 18th. All right. So you have the summons, and then you have the 10-day period of penance afterwards. September, October is usually when Rosh Hashanah falls. So you have the summons, then you have this 10-day period of atonement. At the end comes Yom Kippur. Okay, Yom Kippur is the Day of Atonement. Penitence, okay, you focus on your sin, you focus on your wrongdoing. The Day of Atonement is when your sin is lifted. It will require a sacrifice at the temple. Okay, and like I said, it is celebrated at the end of Rosh Hashanah. 2 of the other festivals that we've mentioned so far, you've got Hanukkah, which is the Festival of Lights. It's usually observed in December, although sometimes it can be late November. It can start in late November. It's a period of 8 days or 8 nights. And it celebrates the Maccabean revolt. okay, and the freedom to worship. Because remember, the Maccabees wanted freedom. They eventually retake Jerusalem. They're going to put the menorah, the lampstand, which is described in the Torah, they're going to put that back. They need it kept lit. They only have a little bit of oil, and they're not sure they're going to be able to keep it lit, but it miraculously stays lighted for 8 nights. That's why you have it. Um, you have a center candle, which is known as the slave candle, and you use that to light a candle each night until the 8 candles are lit, and it signifies this miracle where the lights kept burning. Okay, and of course, by the time the 8 nights were over, the Hebrews had more oil and they could keep the lamp burning like they should. The other holiday is Passover, okay, which usually happens in March or April, and it commemorates the deliverance from Egypt, specifically the last plague where the angel of death passed over the house of the Hebrews or the homes of the Hebrews. Okay, and like I said, it celebrates the freedom from Egypt. Again, real quick overview of some of the high points of Judaism, some of the ideas that we see today in the modern world. Be sure you've gotten the things down I've told you to get down. Be sure you've answered the questions on that little review sheet, because we will have a quiz on Judaism later this week. And then we're going to move into Christianity next week, and then Islam down the road.